Alarms scream through my ship before I even understand what I have done. Red light floods the cockpit. My hands freeze over the controls. The navigation screen shows one line of text, repeated in every language my translator knows. You have entered human space without authorization. You will never return. My name is Cale Dorn. I am a cargo runner. I have spent 12 years moving goods between quiet systems, staying far from any border that matters. Today, for the first time in my life, I crossed a line every trader in the galaxy is warned never to cross. It was not supposed to happen this way. 3 hours earlier, my engine had failed in the middle of a debt run. Pirates were closing in from behind, and the only clear path on my scanner cut straight through a stretch of space marked with a warning beacon. My crew argued with me. Vesa, my pilot, said it was a trick, that no one actually enforces that border, that the humans are too new, too small, too proud to guard a line that long. Torin, my engineer, said nothing, because Torin never believes in taking risks until the risk has already happened. I made the choice. I turned the ship toward the beacon and pushed through it. Now the alarm will not stop, and the pirates behind us have vanished from my scanner, as if they turned away the moment we crossed. That alone should have warned me. Pirates fear very little, but apparently they fear this line more than they fear failure. Vesa's voice cracks through the comm. Cale, we need to turn back, now. I look at the scanner. Nothing but empty space ahead. No ships, no stations, no lights, just silence and stars. I tell her we will turn back once we put distance between us and where the pirates were. She does not answer. She simply grips the controls tighter. Torin speaks from the engine bay, his voice low. The engine is not repaired. If we stop now, we drift. If we press forward, we might find something that can help us, or we might find something that ends us. I feel the weight of every story I ever laughed off. Traders talk about the border the way old sailors used to talk about deep ocean creatures back on ancient worlds, something rarely seen, almost impossible to believe in, yet everyone still avoids the water where it swims. No species has openly gone to war with humanity in decades, not because humanity is the strongest fleet in known space, but because nobody wants to learn what happens after that warning message. I always assumed it was propaganda, a story to keep smaller species scared and compliant. Humans are recent. They joined the wider galaxy only 2 centuries ago, arriving already cautious, already guarded, refusing every invitation to open their worlds. Some species mocked them for it, some pitied them. I did neither. I simply never thought about them at all. Now their warning glows on my screen, and I think about nothing else. We drift for nearly an hour, engine sputtering, no sign of pursuit, no sign of rescue. My scanner should be catching debris, asteroids, some background noise of the universe. Instead, there is nothing. It feels less like empty space and more like a held breath. Miri, the youngest on my crew, barely older than a cadet, whispers what all of us are thinking. Maybe they already know we are here. I tell her that is impossible. Space is vast. Nobody can watch all of it. Then my communication panel lights up on its own. No hail request, no warning tone. It simply activates, as though something on the other end already had access to my ship the entire time. A voice comes through, calm, unhurried, almost gentle. This is Grace Whitfield, monitoring Station 7. You have entered restricted space. Please power down non-essential systems and hold your position. I do not answer immediately. My mind is racing through every version of this moment I imagined as a child listening to old traders' warnings. I expected shouting. I expected threats. I expected weapon systems locking onto my hull. Instead, I get a name and a request spoken like she is asking me to move my chair out of a doorway. Vesa mutes the comm and turns to me, eyes wide. Cale, they found us in less time than it takes light to cross a solar system. How is that possible? I do not have an answer. I only know that panic will not help us now. I unmute the comm and answer as steadily as I can. This is Cale Dorn, cargo vessel Wandering Current. We crossed the line by accident, fleeing pirates. Our engine is damaged. We mean no harm. There is a pause, not a long one, just enough to feel like she is actually listening, not simply waiting for her turn to speak. "I understand," Grace says. "Please remain calm. Someone will meet you shortly." The comm goes silent again, and my scanner remains empty. No fleet appears. No warning shots. Just her voice, and then nothing, as though the entire encounter was designed to feel smaller than it actually is. Torin climbs up from the engine bay, wiping grease from his hands, and says what I am already thinking. That was not what I expected. None of us expected any of this. We wait. Minutes stretch into what feels like hours. My mind keeps circling back to old rumors, half-forgotten stories from traders who claim to have seen human patrol ships appear without warning, then disappear the same way, leaving no wreckage, no survivors to explain what happened, only silence where a threat used to be. I always assumed those stories were exaggerated for effect. Now, drifting powerless in restricted space, I am no longer so certain. Miri breaks the silence, voice trembling. "Do you think they will just let us leave?" I want to tell her yes. I want to promise her that this will end with an apology and an escort back across the border. But something about Grace's voice, so calm, so controlled, so unbothered by the fact that 4 strangers just crossed into forbidden territory, tells me this will not be simple. Vesa checks the scanner again and freezes. "Kale, look." A single shape appears on the display, approaching without any of the noise or signature I expect from an active engine. No exhaust trail, no drive signature. It should not be possible to move that quietly through open space, yet there it is, closing the distance with unsettling precision. I ask Torin how long until it reaches us. He studies the numbers twice before answering. At this rate, less than 10 minutes. 10 minutes to prepare for something none of us understand. 10 minutes to decide whether we run, whether we fight, or whether we simply wait and hope that calm voice on the comm meant exactly what she said. I look at my crew, each face carrying the same fear I feel twisting inside my chest. We are cargo runners, not soldiers. Our ship carries crates of unremarkable trade goods, not weapons capable of standing against anything serious. Whatever approaches us holds every advantage, and the only thing we hold is uncertainty. Vesa breaks the silence first. "If we try to run, they will catch us before the engine even reaches half power." Torin nods slowly. "If we try to fight, we lose before we understand what we are fighting." Miri says nothing. She only stares at the growing shape on the scanner, her hands shaking. I make a decision, the only one that makes sense. We wait. We stay calm. We let them see we mean no harm, because if the stories are true, and humanity truly does not tolerate hostility within their borders, then our only chance of surviving this encounter is proving we are not a threat. The shape on the scanner grows closer, and for the first time since crossing that invisible line, I understand exactly why every trader across 100 systems repeats the same warning without ever needing an explanation. Some borders are drawn not because of politics or trade disputes, but because of memory, and I am about to learn exactly what that memory is protecting. The ship outside our window is unlike anything cataloged in my training. No blinking lights, no visible weapon ports, no markings meant to intimidate. Just smooth, dark plating that seems to swallow the light around it, moving with a silence that feels deliberate, as though built specifically to remove every trace of drama from an encounter that should be terrifying. A second voice comes through the comm, different from Grace, lower, steady, careful in its pacing. "This is Daniel Marsh. We are bringing your vessel in for inspection. Please do not attempt evasive maneuvers. Your engine will not survive the strain, and neither will you." There is no anger in his voice, no excitement, just fact, delivered plainly, the way someone might warn a child not to touch a hot stove, not out of cruelty, but because the outcome is simply true. I answer as clearly as I can. "We understand. We will not resist." A pause. Then, almost gently, he says, "Good." My ship shudders as something locks onto our hull, a smooth pull guiding us forward without a single moment of turbulence. Whatever technology controls this process, It handles our fragile vessel like glass, careful not to shatter what it captures. Vesa whispers beside me, "They are not even trying to scare us." That is exactly what scares me the most. As my ship is drawn deeper into human territory, I realize the old stories were never about cruelty. They were about certainty. Humanity does not need to threaten. They simply act, and the universe learns to fear the calm behind their actions rather than the noise. I glance at my crew one final time before the dark shape swallows my ship into its shadow. Whatever happens next, I understand one truth with absolute clarity. We are no longer simple traders caught in a border violation. We are about to become witnesses to the exact reason why humanity's warning has never needed to be tested twice. The dark shape releases its hold on my ship only after guiding us into a hangar so vast it swallows the wandering current like a single grain of sand dropped into an ocean. Lights flicker on around us, revealing rows of docking clamps, none of them occupied, as though this entire space was built to handle far more traffic than currently exists. I wonder how many ships like mine have passed through here before, and whether any of them ever left again. Vesa powers down the last of our systems, her hands trembling slightly despite her effort to appear composed. Torin stands near the exit hatch, arms crossed, jaw tight. Miri stays close to me, her earlier bravado gone completely, replaced by the quiet fear of someone who finally understands the size of the mistake we made. The hatch outside our ship hisses open without anyone approaching it manually. A voice speaks through the hangar's overhead system, calm as ever. "Please exit the vessel. No one will harm you if you cooperate." I look at my crew. There is no other choice left to make. I nod, and one by one, we step out into human territory for the first time. The hangar smells faintly of metal and something clean, almost sterile, without the usual chaos of trade docks I am used to. No shouting, no crowds, no security drones hovering aggressively overhead. Just quiet efficiency, broken only by the soft hum of distant machinery. A woman steps forward from a side corridor, dressed in simple gray clothing, no visible weapon, no armor, nothing that marks her as a threat, beyond the calm control in her posture. Her hair is tied back, her expression unreadable, neither hostile nor friendly, simply present. "I am Grace Whitfield," she says, her voice matching the one from the comm exactly. "You will follow me." I ask her what will happen to us. She studies me for a moment before answering. "That depends on what we find." It is not the answer I want, but it is honest, and something about her tone tells me she does not deal in comfortable lies. We follow her through a corridor lined with doors that show no markings, no signs, nothing to indicate what lies behind them. Miri walks close to me, her breathing shallow. Vesa keeps glancing over her shoulder, searching for an exit that clearly does not exist. Torin remains silent, watching everything with the focus of someone trying to memorize every detail in case it becomes useful later. Grace leads us into a room with a long table and several chairs, nothing threatening about its design, yet the atmosphere feels heavier than any prison cell I have imagined. She gestures for us to sit, and we do, because refusing feels pointless in a place where refusal has clearly never mattered before. A second figure enters moments later, a man, younger than Grace, wearing a similar gray uniform, carrying a tablet under one arm. He introduces himself as Daniel Marsh, the same voice that spoke to us during the approach. He sits across from us and studies each of our faces individually before speaking. "You crossed the border while fleeing hostiles. That much we already confirmed through your ship's logs." I ask how they accessed our logs without physically touching our ship. Daniel does not answer the question directly. Instead, he continues speaking as though the interruption never happened. "Your intentions were not hostile. That improves your situation significantly. However, crossing this border carries consequences regardless of intention. That is the nature of the warning. It does not ask why you crossed. It only confirms that you did." Vesa finally speaks, her voice sharper than I expect. "What consequences? We did not attack anyone. We did not even want to be here." Daniel looks at her, his expression calm but firm. That is understood. And yet the border exists precisely because good intentions are not always enough to prevent disaster. We learned that lesson once, at a cost too high to describe casually. We do not intend to repeat it. The room falls silent. I feel the weight of his words pressing down harder than any threat could. There is no anger in his voice, no desire to frighten us further, just quiet certainty, the kind that comes from experience rather than policy. Miri, still trembling, asks the question none of us wanted to voice aloud. Are you going to end our lives? Daniel's expression softens slightly, and for the first time, something resembling sympathy crosses his face. No, he says, we do not harm those who mean no harm. But you will not return home the way you arrived. That much I can promise you. The words settle over me like a slow, cold weight, not an ending, but something permanent nonetheless. I think of my home, my routes, the life I built moving cargo between quiet systems, and wonder how much of it I am about to lose. Grace steps forward again, her tone gentle but unwavering. Before anything else happens, you will be evaluated. Every crossing is treated individually. Your case will be reviewed carefully. Nothing will be decided without full understanding of your situation. I ask her what evaluation means exactly. She meets my eyes directly. It means we look at who you are, why you came here, and what threat, if any, you represent. It also means we look at what you saw and what you now know about us. That knowledge carries weight of its own. Her words hang heavy in the room. I begin to understand that this is not simply about punishment. It is about protecting a secret so significant that even accidental discovery demands a response. Torin finally breaks his silence, voice steady despite the tension around us. What is it you are protecting? Why does a single line in space carry more weight than an entire fleet's worth of warnings from other species? Daniel and Grace exchange a brief glance, something unspoken passing between them, an old understanding neither wishes to explain fully just yet. Daniel answers carefully. That is not something we share casually. Perhaps, depending on how your evaluation proceeds, you will learn more. For now, understand only this. Every rule we enforce exists because we paid a price no one should have to pay twice. The words echo in my mind long after he finishes speaking. I think back to the stories I dismissed as exaggeration, the border warnings I laughed off as talk meant to scare traders, the quiet respect other species always gave to human territory despite mocking their supposed weakness in every other conversation. For the first time, I understand that respect was never about weakness at all. It was about survival. Grace instructs us to remain in the room while preparations are made for our evaluation. Before leaving, she pauses at the door and looks back at us, her expression carrying something unexpected, almost regret. For what it is worth, she says, I hope your case proves simple. Not every crossing ends the same way. The door closes behind her, leaving the four of us alone, with nothing but silence and the growing realization that our fate now rests entirely in the hands of people who clearly do not make decisions lightly. Hours pass. Though it is difficult to measure time accurately in a room without windows, Miri eventually falls into an exhausted, uneasy sleep against Vessa's shoulder. Torin paces slowly, his mind clearly working through every possible outcome, searching for a way out that likely does not exist. I sit quietly, replaying every choice that led us here, wondering if there was ever a version of today where we avoided this border entirely. Eventually, the door opens again, and Daniel returns, this time alone. His expression remains calm, but something in his posture suggests the conversation ahead carries more weight than before. Your evaluation is ready to begin, he says. I suggest you answer honestly. It matters more than you realize. I ask him what happens if we fail this evaluation. He looks at me for a long moment before answering, his voice quieter than before. Then you will understand exactly why this border exists, in a way none of you will ever be able to forget. The words settle over the room like a held breath, and as Daniel leads us out into the corridor once more, I realize that whatever waits ahead will decide far more than simply whether we return home. It will decide who we become after this. The evaluation room is smaller than I expect, round in shape, with soft lighting that feels designed to calm rather than intimidate. A single chair sits in the center, facing a wide screen currently dark. Daniel gestures for me to sit first, explaining that each of us will be evaluated separately. Vesa objects immediately, stepping forward. Whatever happens to Kale happens to all of us. We came here together. Daniel's expression does not change, but something in his tone softens slightly. I understand the loyalty. It speaks well of you. But the process requires individual honesty. Group answers tend to protect feelings rather than reveal truth. I promise you, no one is being separated to cause harm. Reluctantly, Vesa steps back, and I take the chair. The others are led to a waiting area nearby, close enough to see through a transparent wall, but not close enough to hear what unfolds. The screen flickers to life, showing a simple series of questions, along with a soft chime indicating that my responses are being recorded. Daniel takes a seat beside the screen, his tablet resting on his lap. "Why did you cross the border?" he asks first, though the answer already appears typed on the screen before me. I tell him the truth: fear, desperation, a damaged engine, and pirates closing in. Nothing more complicated than survival. He nods slowly, tapping something onto his tablet. "Did you know the consequences before crossing?" I admit that I knew stories, warnings, rumors, but nothing concrete. I always assumed exaggeration played a role in keeping smaller traders away from human territory. Daniel's expression remains unreadable as he continues through a series of questions, each one probing deeper into my history, my crew's history, my intentions, my knowledge of human territory prior to this incident. I answer honestly, because lying in a place capable of accessing my ship's logs without physical contact seems both foolish and pointless. After nearly an hour, the questions shift in tone, becoming less about my past and more about what I now know. "What have you seen since crossing the border?" he asks. I describe the empty space, the silent approach of his ship, the calm efficiency of everything since our capture. I tell him honestly that nothing about this encounter matches the stories traders whisper about, at least not in the way I expected. Daniel studies me carefully before responding. That is because most of those stories come from imagination rather than experience. Few who cross this border ever speak of it afterward. I ask him why. He hesitates, just slightly, before answering. Because most choose silence over reliving what they saw next. Some are simply unable to speak of it at all. The words settle heavily in my chest, and for the first time since crossing that invisible line, true fear replaces my earlier anxiety. Daniel closes his tablet and stands. "Your evaluation is complete for now. The final decision will not come from me alone. Rest. You will need it." As he leads me back toward the waiting area, I glance through the transparent wall and see Vesa's face tighten with worry, clearly reading the tension in my expression despite my effort to remain composed. Whatever waits beyond this evaluation, I sense it will not simply decide whether we go home. It will decide something far larger, something tied to whatever price humanity paid long ago to justify a warning so absolute that no species in known space has ever dared question it twice. Sleep does not come easily in a place without windows, without clocks, without any marker of time beyond the soft hum of distant machinery. I lie on a narrow bed in a small room they call quarters, though it feels closer to a holding cell dressed in gentler language. Miri sleeps fitfully nearby, her breathing uneven. Vesa sits against the wall, arms wrapped around her knees, refusing to close her eyes despite clear exhaustion. Torin paces the small space slowly, counting steps as though measuring the room for some plan he has not shared with the rest of us. I ask him what he is thinking. He stops pacing and looks at me directly. I am thinking that if we do not act soon, we may never get another chance. Vesa's head snaps up. Act how? You saw what happened when we tried to run before. Their ship caught us without effort. What makes you think anything has changed? Torin explains quietly that during his brief time near the engineering corridor, he noticed a maintenance hatch left unlocked, likely by mistake, leading toward what appeared to be a secondary hangar. He believes if we move quickly, quietly, before the final evaluation concludes, we might find a way back to our ship. I remind him that our ship's engine is still damaged, and even if we somehow reached it, escaping human territory undetected seems impossible given everything we have witnessed so far. Torin's jaw tightens. Staying here and waiting for judgment feels worse than trying and failing. Miri stirs awake, overhearing the last part of our conversation. Her eyes widen with fear. If we try to escape and fail, will it make things worse for us? None of us have an answer, because none of us truly understand the rules governing this place. But fear has a way of making desperate plans feel reasonable, even when logic argues otherwise. Eventually, exhaustion outweighs caution, and Torin agrees to wait until the following cycle before attempting anything. I try to rest, though my mind keeps replaying Daniel's words from the evaluation. Most choose silence over reliving what they saw next. Some are simply unable to speak of it at all. When the door finally opens again, it is not Daniel who enters, but Grace, her expression carrying a weight I have not seen from her before. "Your evaluation results are ready," she says. "Come with me." She leads only me this time, leaving the others behind, despite Vessa's obvious protest. I look back once before the door closes, catching Miri's frightened eyes and Torin's clenched jaw, neither able to offer comfort beyond a silent nod. The corridor feels longer this time, though I suspect it is simply my nerves distorting the distance. Grace walks beside me, quiet for most of the journey, until finally she speaks without looking at me directly. "For what it is worth, your case shows no history of hostility toward our people. That matters more than you realize." I ask her what happens now. She hesitates, choosing her words carefully. "You will meet with someone who oversees final decisions for border crossings. I cannot predict exactly what will be decided, but I can tell you this. Whatever happens next is not meant to harm you unfairly. It is meant to protect something far larger than either of us." Her words offer little comfort, yet something in her tone suggests she genuinely believes what she is saying, not as policy, but as personal conviction. We arrive at a door unlike any other in this facility, wide, seamless, without handles or visible controls. It slides open silently as we approach, revealing a room bathed in soft light, its walls lined with quiet screens displaying data I cannot interpret. A man stands near the center of the room, older than Daniel, his posture calm, but carrying an authority that fills the space without needing volume or aggression. He turns toward me as I enter, his expression unreadable at first glance. "I am Henry Calloway," he says simply. "I oversee decisions regarding border crossings such as yours." I greet him as respectfully as I can manage, though my voice trembles slightly despite my effort to remain composed. Henry gestures toward a chair, inviting me to sit, then takes his own seat across from me, folding his hands calmly. "Your evaluation shows no intention of hostility," he begins. "Your crew's history reflects simple trade, nothing more. Under different circumstances, this would already resolve favorably." I feel a small flicker of hope rise inside me, quickly tempered by the word "different circumstances" hanging heavily in the air. "However," Henry continues, "your presence within our territory means you witnessed things few outsiders ever see. Our technology, our defense capabilities, our internal operations. That knowledge, regardless of intention, cannot simply leave with you unchanged." I ask him what that means exactly. He studies me for a long moment before answering. "It means the warning attached to this border was never a threat born from cruelty. It was a promise born from necessity, one we do not break regardless of circumstance." Grace, standing quietly near the door, speaks softly. "Sir, might it help if he understood why the warning exists at all?" Henry considers this for a moment before nodding slowly. Perhaps understanding will make what comes next easier to accept. He leans forward slightly, his eyes carrying a weight that makes the room feel smaller than before. 2 centuries ago, Before humanity ever ventured beyond our home system, we made contact with a species that presented itself peacefully. We welcomed them without caution, believing peaceful intentions guaranteed peaceful outcomes. We were wrong. What followed nearly ended us entirely. Cities destroyed, populations reduced to fractions of what they once were. We survived only through unity and sacrifice most species will never fully understand. His voice remained steady throughout, though something beneath the calm surface hints at old pain carried carefully rather than forgotten. When we finally rebuilt enough to rejoin the wider galaxy, we made one decision above all others. Never again would ignorance leave us vulnerable. Never again would trust be extended without absolute certainty. The border you crossed exists because we learned, at unbearable cost, that some risks cannot be tolerated twice. I sit in silence, absorbing the weight of his words. Every story I dismissed as exaggeration suddenly carries new meaning. The calm efficiency, the quiet control, the absolute certainty behind every action since my capture, none of it stems from arrogance. It stems from scars carved deep enough to reshape an entire civilization's approach to survival. I ask him quietly what happens to those who cross this border, now that I understand why it exists. Henry's expression softens slightly, though his answer remains firm. Each case differs. Some crossings prove hostile and are dealt with accordingly. Others, like yours, prove accidental, born from desperation rather than malice. For those cases, we do not choose harm, we choose something else entirely. I ask him what that something else means for me specifically. He glances briefly at Grace before answering. It means you will not return to your old life unchanged. Whether that change proves difficult or valuable depends largely on how you choose to carry it forward. His answer remains deliberately vague, yet something about his tone suggests this uncertainty is intentional, meant to prepare me for a decision not yet finalized. Grace steps forward gently. Your crew will be evaluated similarly. Their outcomes may differ from yours, depending on individual history and circumstance. I ask if we will remain together. Henry considers this carefully before answering. That depends on the final decision, which has not yet been made. I called you here first because your leadership placed you at the center of this incident. Your choices, more than anyone else's, will shape what happens next for all of you. The weight of his words presses heavily against my chest. Whatever awaits my crew now rests, at least partially, on how I respond to what comes next. Before I can ask further questions, an alert flashes briefly across one of the screens lining the room. Henry glances at it, his expression shifting slightly, though he does not explain its meaning immediately. Grace notices his reaction and asks quietly if something is wrong. Henry studies the screen for another moment before answering. It seems your remaining crew members grew restless during your absence. Security intercepted an attempt to reach a secondary hangar just minutes ago. My stomach drops. Torrens' plan, the one I quietly hoped he would abandon, apparently proceeded despite our agreement to wait. Henry looks at me directly, his expression carrying neither anger nor surprise, simply calm acknowledgement. Desperation often leads to poor decisions. Fortunately, no harm came from the attempt. Your crew remains safe, though this development complicates matters slightly. I ask him what happens now because of their attempt. Henry rises slowly from his seat, his tone carrying quiet finality. Now we proceed with full evaluation for all of you, together. Whatever trust may have existed toward a simple, cooperative resolution must now be reconsidered carefully. Grace opens the door leading back into the corridor, gesturing for me to follow. As I step forward, Henry's voice stops me one final time. Kale Dorn, he says, remember this moment carefully. Whatever choice led your crew toward that hangar reflects fear, not malice. I intend to remember that distinction when deciding your fate. I suggest you help your crew remember it as well. His words offer a fragile thread of hope amid growing uncertainty, and as Grace leads me back through the quiet corridors toward my waiting crew, I understand clearly that whatever mistakes we make from this point forward, will weigh just as heavily as the mistake that brought us here in the first place. When Grace leads me back into the waiting area, I find Vesa pacing furiously while Miri sits curled in a corner, arms wrapped tightly around herself. Torin stands near the transparent wall, his expression a mixture of frustration and quiet shame, clearly aware that his decision changed something important. Vesa spots me first and rushes forward. "Kale, they caught us before we even reached the hangar. It was over before it began." I glance at Torin, who meets my eyes only briefly before looking away. I do not scold him, though part of me wants to. Instead, I simply tell them what Henry shared with me, the history behind the border, the reason behind its absolute nature, the fragile chance still remaining for a peaceful resolution despite the failed attempt. Miri listens quietly, her earlier fear shifting slightly into something closer to understanding. Vesa remains skeptical, though she says nothing further, perhaps recognizing that argument accomplishes little now. Grace gestures for all of us to follow her, explaining that the full evaluation will now proceed together, rather than individually, given the shift in circumstances. She leads us back through the same corridor, though this time toward a different room, larger than before, with several seats arranged around a wide central table. Henry waits for us there, along with Daniel standing quietly near the far wall. Henry gestures for us to sit, his expression calm despite the tension clearly radiating from my crew. "I understand fear drove your attempt to reach the hangar," he begins, addressing Torin directly. "Desperation often clouds judgment. However, actions carry consequences regardless of intention, just as your original crossing did." Torin lowers his eyes slightly, offering no excuse, simply nodding in quiet acknowledgement. Henry continues, his tone shifting slightly towards something more instructive than accusatory. "I will not pretend this incident did not complicate matters. However, I remain willing to consider the full context of your situation before finalizing any decision." Vesa speaks up, her voice steadier than before. "Sir, if I may ask, why explain any of this to us at all? Why not simply decide our fate without offering understanding first?" Henry studies her for a long moment before answering. "Because understanding matters. Fear without context breeds resentment, and resentment breeds future conflict. We learn that lesson as painfully as we learn the lesson behind this border itself. Explaining does not weaken our position, it strengthens the outcome, regardless of what that outcome becomes." His answer settles the room into a thoughtful quiet. Daniel steps forward from his place near the wall, addressing us directly for the first time since our reunion. "Perhaps it would help to understand what daily life looks like within our borders," he says. "Many assume our strength comes purely from weapons and technology. That assumption misses the larger truth." He gestures toward one of the screens lining the room, which flickers to life, displaying images of ordinary human life, cities filled with greenery, communities working together on shared projects, children playing in open spaces without visible fear or restriction. "Our strength comes from unity forged through shared memory," Daniel explains. "Every citizen understands the cost of vulnerability, not through fear, but through education passed carefully from one generation to the next. We do not glorify the tragedy that shaped us. We simply refuse to forget it." Miri watches the screen with quiet fascination, her earlier terror softening slightly into curiosity. Vesa remains guarded, though her posture relaxes just enough to suggest genuine interest beneath her caution. I ask Daniel how humanity managed to rebuild so completely after suffering such devastating loss. He considers the question carefully before answering. "Recovery was not fast, nor was it simple. It took generations of careful rebuilding, difficult choices, and a shared commitment never to repeat the mistakes that nearly ended us. Every law, every border, every quiet efficiency you have witnessed since crossing into our territory exists because we chose discipline over fear, unity over division." Henry adds quietly, "Our ancestors could have chosen isolation entirely, closing ourselves off from the wider galaxy forever. Instead, we chose careful engagement, guided by boundaries meant to protect rather than punish." I ask him directly what boundary applies to us now, given everything that has happened since our crossing. Henry exchanges a brief glance with Grace and Daniel before answering. Your case presents an unusual opportunity. Most who cross this border either mean harm or simply vanish quietly into permanent restriction, unable to return to their previous lives in any meaningful way. Your circumstances, however, suggest something different might be possible. Vesa leans forward slightly. What do you mean by different? Henry folds his hands calmly before continuing. Rather than permanent restriction, your crew may qualify for supervised reintegration, a program rarely offered, reserved only for cases showing clear absence of hostile intent, combined with willingness to accept certain conditions moving forward. I ask him what conditions those might involve. Henry answers carefully. First, memory adjustment regarding specific technological details witnessed during your time here. Nothing drastic, simply removal of information that could compromise our security if shared elsewhere. Second, a permanent marker embedded quietly within your ship's systems, allowing continued monitoring should you ever approach our border again. Third, and most importantly, an understanding that this warning, the one so many species dismiss as exaggeration, must be carried forward truthfully by each of you, ensuring others understand its weight before making the same mistake you did. Torrin speaks for the first time since entering the room, his voice quieter than before. And if we refuse these conditions? Henry's expression remains steady, though something firmer enters his tone. Then permanent restriction becomes the only remaining option, the same option offered to those whose intentions we cannot trust. The room falls silent as the weight of this choice settles over each of us. Miri looks toward me, clearly seeking guidance. Vesa's jaw tightens, though she says nothing further. Torrin stares at the table, likely replaying his earlier failed escape attempt, aware it nearly cost us this fragile opportunity entirely. I ask Henry how much time we have to decide. He answers simply, "This decision cannot be delayed indefinitely, though I am willing to allow you time to discuss it privately among yourselves." Grace steps forward, offering to escort us to a private space where we can talk without observation, or at least the appearance of privacy, given everything we have witnessed about human capability since arriving here. Once alone, Vesa turns to me immediately. Kale, memory adjustment, permanent monitoring, none of this sounds like freedom. It sounds like a different kind of restriction dressed in gentler language. I understand her concern, yet something about Henry's explanation, the history behind the border, the quiet dignity in Daniel's description of human recovery, convinces me this offer, however uncomfortable, remains far better than the alternative. Torrin speaks quietly, his earlier defiance replaced by something closer to resignation. My attempt to escape nearly cost us this chance entirely. Whatever decision we make now, I will not repeat that mistake again. Miri looks between us, her voice small but steady. I do not want to forget everything, but I do not want to disappear forever either. If this offer lets us go home, even changed, I would rather accept it than risk losing everything completely. I consider each of their words carefully before speaking my own thoughts aloud. We came here through desperation, not malice. Henry acknowledged that distinction matters. If accepting these conditions allows us to return home, carrying this warning forward honestly rather than dismissing it as exaggeration the way we once did, then perhaps that outcome serves a purpose larger than our own survival. Vesa remains quiet for a long moment before finally nodding, reluctant but resolved. If this is our only path home, then we accept it together, as a crew, the same way we entered this mess together. Torrin and Miri nod in agreement, and when Grace returns to check on us, I inform her of our decision on behalf of my crew. She listens carefully, then nods once, her expression carrying quiet relief rather than triumph. I believe this is the right choice, she says softly. Come, Henry will want to finalize the process personally. As we follow her back toward the central room, I glance at my crew one final time before whatever comes next reshapes each of us permanently. Vesa's expression remains guarded but resolute. Torrin walks with quiet determination, clearly resolved to accept whatever follows without further resistance. Miri walks close beside me, her earlier fear replaced by something closer to cautious hope. Whatever changes await us beyond this room, I understand clearly now that our survival depends not on resisting humanity's judgment, but on trusting a warning we once dismissed as nothing more than exaggerated rumor, a warning that, as I now understand completely, was never meant to threaten, but to protect something humanity refuses to ever risk losing again. Henry meets us again in the central room, his expression carrying quiet approval when Grace confirms our decision. He gestures for us to sit, then explains the process ahead, in careful detail, ensuring none of us proceed without full understanding of what awaits. The memory adjustment will not erase everything you experienced here, he explains. It will simply soften specific technical details, enough to protect our security without stripping away your sense of what happened. You will remember fear, uncertainty, and resolution. You will not remember precise schematics or technical processes that could compromise us if shared elsewhere. I ask him how such a precise adjustment is even possible. Daniel answers this time, his tone patient rather than boastful. It relies on careful neural mapping, technology developed specifically to protect both visitors and our own security, without resorting to more drastic measures. It causes no lasting harm, though it may feel disorienting immediately afterward. Vesa crosses her arms, clearly still uneasy despite our earlier agreement. And the marker you mentioned, the one placed within our ship? Henry answers calmly. A small device, embedded quietly within your ship's core systems, allowing us to recognize your vessel should you ever approach this border again. It does not track your movements elsewhere in the galaxy. Its function activates only near our territory, ensuring swift identification rather than repeated evaluation. Torin asks the question weighing heaviest on all of us. And if we choose never to return here again? Henry's expression softens slightly. Then the marker remains dormant indefinitely, serving no purpose beyond quiet reassurance for both sides. Miri, quieter than the others, asks one final question. Will it hurt? Henry meets her eyes directly, his tone gentle despite the seriousness of the process ahead. Discomfort, yes. Lasting harm, no. I promise you that much. With no further questions remaining, Grace leads us one by one into a smaller room containing a single reclined chair, surrounded by soft, pulsing lights. Miri goes first, her hand trembling slightly as she settles into the chair. I stay beside her until the process begins, offering what comfort I can before stepping back as instructed. The procedure itself takes only minutes, though watching Miri's expression shift from tension to calm, then to a peaceful stillness, feels far longer. When she finally opens her eyes again, she blinks slowly, disoriented but unharmed, exactly as promised. Vesa follows next, then Torin, each emerging from the chair with the same disoriented calm, memories intact regarding the emotional journey we shared, yet clearly softened around specific technical details neither of them can quite recall afterward. Finally, it is my turn. I settle into the chair, the soft lights pulsing gently above me, and Grace's voice speaks quietly nearby, guiding me through slow, calming breaths as the process begins. I feel a strange warmth spread through my mind, not painful, simply unfamiliar, like watching certain memories soften at the edges without disappearing entirely. I recall the hangar, the corridors, Henry's careful explanations, Daniel's patient answers, Grace's quiet kindness, throughout an experience that could have unfolded far more harshly than it did. Yet certain details, specific technology, precise schematics I glimpsed briefly along the way, fade gently into something closer to vague impression rather than clear memory. When I finally open my eyes again, Grace stands nearby, her expression carrying quiet reassurance. "How do you feel?" she asks softly. I take a moment before answering, testing the strange, gentle fog now settled around specific memories. Different, I admit honestly, but not lost. She nods, seemingly satisfied with my answer. That is exactly the intention. Once the process concludes, for all four of us, Henry meets us once more in the central room, his expression carrying quiet finality. Your ship has already been repaired and prepared for departure, he explains. The marker has been embedded successfully, dormant unless activated by future proximity to our border. I ask him what happens now, given everything we experienced. Henry studies each of us carefully before answering. Now, you return home, carrying this experience honestly forward, sharing the truth behind our warning, rather than dismissing it the way so many others do. Perhaps your story will prevent future crossings born from ignorance rather than malice. Vesa speaks quietly, her earlier hostility replaced by something closer to respect. Thank you for choosing understanding over simple punishment. Henry's expression softens slightly, something almost resembling warmth breaking through his usual calm authority. We chose understanding because we remember what happens when understanding is absent. That memory guides every decision we make, even difficult ones like this. Daniel steps forward, offering a final piece of guidance before we depart. Remember, the story you carry home now holds real weight. Others will dismiss it as easily as you once dismissed similar warnings. Your challenge will be convincing them otherwise, not through fear, but through honest testimony. Grace walks us personally back toward the hangar where our ship waits, fully repaired, gleaming faintly under the soft overhead lights. Before we board, she pauses, looking at each of us individually. I hope you find peace with what happened here, she says quietly. Not every crossing ends this way. Remember that, and perhaps others will listen more carefully because of it. I thank her sincerely, surprised by how much her calm kindness throughout this ordeal shaped my understanding of humanity, far more than any weapon or technology could have. As we board the wandering current, Torin immediately moves toward the engine controls, confirming with quiet relief that the repairs are thorough, far beyond what our own resources could have accomplished. Miri settles into her usual seat, quieter than before, though the earlier terror in her eyes has softened into something closer to thoughtful reflection. Vesa takes her position at the helm, glancing back at me once before beginning startup procedures. I take my seat, watching through the viewport as the massive hangar doors slowly open, revealing open space beyond, the same emptiness that once felt so threatening, now carrying a strange, quiet familiarity. As we exit human territory, crossing back over the same invisible line that started this entire ordeal, my scanner flickers briefly, confirming the same warning message that first sent alarms blaring through my ship days ago. You have entered human space without authorization. You will never return. Except now, the words carry an entirely different meaning, not a threat meant to frighten, but a promise meant to protect, one I finally understand completely after living through everything it represents. Vesa breaks the silence first, her voice steady despite everything we experienced. What do we tell people when they ask what happened to us? I consider her question carefully before answering. We tell them the truth, not the exaggerated rumors traders whisper without understanding, but what we actually witnessed. Calm efficiency instead of cruelty. Careful judgment instead of blind punishment. A warning born from unimaginable loss, carried forward not through anger, but through quiet, unwavering discipline. Torin nods slowly from his position near the engine controls. Perhaps if enough of us tell the truth, fewer crossings will happen out of ignorance. Miri speaks softly from her seat, her earlier fear finally settling into something closer to quiet wisdom. I do not think I will ever forget what I saw there. Even with parts of it softened, I still remember how it felt, being trusted with mercy we never expected. I look out at the stars ahead, the same stars that once felt endless and impersonal, now carrying a different weight entirely. Somewhere behind us, a marker rests quietly within our ship's systems, a permanent reminder of the choice we made, the mercy we received, and the responsibility we now carry forward. Days later, as we return to more familiar trade routes, I find myself repeating our story to other traders we encounter along the way, each one reacting with the same skepticism I once carried myself. Some laugh, dismissing our account as exaggeration meant to frighten competitors away from human territory. Others listen more carefully, perhaps sensing the sincerity behind our words. The quiet weight neither Vesa, Torin, Miri, nor I can fully disguise no matter how casually we attempt to share the story. One evening, docked at a quiet trading station far from human territory, a young trader approaches our ship, clearly nervous, clearly curious. He introduces himself simply as Owen, admitting he heard rumors about our encounter from other traders along the route. "Is it true?" he asks quietly. "Did you really cross the border and return?" I study his face carefully before answering, recognizing the same skepticism, the same dismissive curiosity I once carried before learning the truth myself. "Yes," I tell him honestly. "We crossed, accidentally, fleeing danger rather than seeking conflict. And yes, we returned, though not entirely unchanged." He asks what happened, clearly expecting stories of violence, cruelty, perhaps even destruction. Instead, I tell him the truth. Calm voices instead of threats, careful evaluation instead of blind punishment, a warning rooted not in arrogance, but in memory too painful to risk repeating. Owen listens quietly, his expression shifting slowly from skepticism to something closer to genuine consideration. "Why would they show mercy at all?" he asks. "Why not simply enforce the warning exactly as written?" I think of Henry's careful explanation, Daniel's patient guidance, Grace's quiet kindness throughout an experience that could have unfolded far more harshly than it did. Because mercy, when given carefully, often teaches a lesson punishment alone cannot, I answer honestly. They did not need to destroy us to prove their strength. They simply needed us to understand it completely, then trusted us to carry that understanding forward honestly. Owen nods slowly, clearly turning this new perspective over in his mind. Perhaps, for the first time, someone outside our crew will consider human territory with caution rooted in respect, rather than the previous careless mixture of mockery and dismissal so many species still cling to. As I return to my ship that evening, Vesa asks quietly whether sharing our story so openly feels wise, given the marker still resting silently within our systems. I consider her question carefully before answering. I believe honesty serves us better than silence ever could. If our story prevents even one future crossing born from ignorance rather than malice, then everything we experienced carries purpose beyond our own survival. Torin, standing nearby, adds quietly that perhaps this is exactly what Henry intended all along, not simply mercy for its own sake, but a calculated trust that honest testimony would accomplish more than fear ever could. Miri, settling in for the evening nearby, offers one final thought before silence finally settles over our ship. "I used to think the warning was simply meant to keep us away. Now I understand it was always meant to teach us something, if we were only willing to listen." As the quiet hum of our ship settles around me that night, I think back to the moment our alarms first blared through the cockpit, the fear that gripped me as that warning message flashed across my screen, the assumption that humanity's border existed purely to threaten rather than protect. I understand now that assumption was wrong, not because humanity lacks strength or resolve, but because their strength was never rooted in cruelty at all. It was rooted in memory, discipline, and a quiet, unwavering commitment never to repeat a tragedy too painful to describe casually. The warning remains exactly as absolute as it always was. Enter human space without authorization, and you will never return unchanged. But now, having lived through everything that warning represents, I understand it not as a threat meant to frighten strangers away, but as a promise meant to protect something far more valuable than any of us initially realized. And as I drift quietly toward sleep that night, carrying both the weight and the lesson of everything I witnessed, I find myself hoping that somewhere across the galaxy, others will listen to our story carefully enough to understand exactly what I now know to be true. Some warnings exist, not to threaten those who hear them, but to protect what remains too precious to ever risk losing again.